Good day, everybody. This is Marguerite van Ginkel of the Group Editors. I recently covered the story of Bevan van Drietten, who stands accused of the murder of his girlfriend, Nikki van Heerden. And naturally, the topic of gender-based violence came around, and there was quite a lot of protests going on. And this brought about the idea to have a chat with some people who are in the field and has got a lot of knowledge on the topic. And today we have Nicolette here and Salome from FAMSA with a couple of questions specifically on violence, gender-based violence, but also family violence and how this is impacting on the families. Welcome and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Marguerite.
Okay, so let's just start off first. Can you tell us a little bit more about FAMSA? What is the function of FAMSA and where are you based?
FAMSA stands for Family South Africa, and we are an organization that focuses on the emotional well-being of our community. So we work with counselors that does counseling, and a bit more detail about that is that we work with trauma, we work with relationship challenges, we work with children that goes through an emotional difficult time, and then also gender-based violence. Okay. Because this is a huge problem in our community as in our country, and this is something that we really feel very strongly about. And yeah, that's why we're so thankful for this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for being here. It can't be easy working with this every day of your life.
Marguerite, it is sad to hear all the sad events that happens out there, but for us it's also a privilege to walk a little bit of that road with somebody, to support them, to help them to just regain their self-purpose and just believing in themselves again.
Okay. So we hear a lot about domestic violence, but what is it really about?
Well, gender-based violence is like the umbrella, and under that we get domestic violence, we get inter-partner violence, and there's different aspects of that. So we can talk a bit about all the different kinds of violence, but it's important to realize that when we talk about gender-based violence, it's about a close relationship between two people or more than two people. So we're not talking about fighting with our neighbors, about the dogs barking. We are talking about there's a relationship, and it's not always just between a man and a woman. It can be between a parent and a child. It can be between colleagues. But there's always a close relationship, and then there's violence, and there's different kinds of violence.
Yeah. So there's a high prevalence, it seems, between partners, and we've just in the time that I've been covering stories here at George Harold, I think I've dealt with at least 6 murders of ladies that were murdered by partners or allegedly murdered by partners. So can you talk a little bit about this a typical relationship and which this kind of violence occurs, and why is it happening? Because that's one of the baffling questions everybody's asking is why is this happening, and why are these ladies who seem to be intelligent working women in relationships with people like this?
You get your verbal, emotional, and psychological abuse.
Okay.
That is usually how it starts. It starts with degrading, insults, humiliation, isolation, excessive jealousness. That is like your red flags, and that is how it usually starts before it goes over to physical violence. So you get the physical violence, you get sexual violence, because if you want to control me in my day-to-day, I'm most vulnerable in the bedroom where I share a bed with someone. So there's always that aspect to IPV. IPV is intimate partner violence. So with a lot of our cases, there's physical violence, and then emotional, verbal, and psychological. There's also going to be sexual violence in the relationship. There's economic abuse, because if you control everything else, you're also going to control how I spend my money, what I do with my money. And that is economic abuse, financial abuse. It's also harassment. Harassment is also a topic on its own, but it falls under domestic violence. If you harass me, send me countless messages every day, emails asking people to check up on me, knowing where I was without me even knowing how you know where I was. And then spiritual abuse is also withholding me from practicing my faith and minimizing what I do with my faith and what I do at the house with my faith. So yeah, that is the forms of the different forms of abuse. And like I said, red flags, if the emotional, verbal, and psychological abuse starts, then you must know this is only going to get worse.
So it sounds like there's a progression
Yeah, there's a progression.
and a pattern of behavior that starts showing up.
Yes, we talk about the cycle of violence.
Okay.
And there's 3 different aspects. First is what we call the honeymoon phase, where everything is going well and there's a lot of love and gifts and wonderful things happening. And then there's the tension building phase. That's where I see I must not say too much, I must keep the children quiet. It's like walking on eggshells, trying to do anything not to provoke the abuser. But because it's a cycle, whatever I do on the long run, it's not going to work. And then there's the explosion phase, where there's
The incident
abuse. What kind of abuse it differs.
Yeah.
And then there's again going back to the honeymoon phase, very sorry, lot of wonderful promises, gifts, all of that, and then the cycle continues. And sometimes it happens within a day, sometimes it happens within a year. There's no specific time frame.
But there's always a cycle happening. You're always stuck in that cycle of
And the cycle normally gets worse and worse, and the time for each phase is becoming shorter and shorter.
Okay, so that makes sense. And I think people often associate domestic violence or gender-based violence with physical violence, but it can be very subtle, right?
Yeah, definitely. That's what I
Especially if it's
say.
psychological abuse.
Yeah.
So what kinds of examples can you think of people that you've spoken to that experience psychological abuse, and how subtle can it be? How do they detect when and I know it's a tough question,
Yeah.
but how do people detect when they are in a cycle, especially when it's not obvious?
Yeah. I say it usually starts with gaslighting, the minimizing of what you are experiencing. Like if someone makes you out to be excessive or dramatic, or your reaction is not appropriate in the situation, like that is gaslighting, minimizing what you feel. If that makes you feel uncomfortable or alerts you as to she never pays attention to what it is that I'm feeling, they dismiss it or they minimize it or make you sound like you're overreacting.
Yeah.
So gaslighting and manipulation and like trying to isolate you from friends and family, the subtle things that,
Yeah.
and then the jealousness starts off cute and then it turns into excessiveness.
Yeah.
It gets ugly. It also progresses. But I
Yeah.
feel like those are the tiny bits of stuff that you definitely have to keep an eye on from early on. And if it gets worse, just know it's gonna get worse even more and more.
Yeah.
Because gender-based violence is all about control. I think the moment you feel somebody else is controlling you and you can't make your own decisions, you can't be yourself, that is then an indication of an unhealthy relationship. And it doesn't need to be physical to be abuse.
Yeah.
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 Definitely.
There's always two parties in a situation, right? So there's the abuser, but then there's also the victim. My question to you really is, what are the things, if somebody's in a situation that they feel they are heavily controlled, manipulated, possibly physically, emotionally, spiritually, or sexually abused, and they are still in it, what is it, firstly, that they can do? How do they find a way out of it? It's very often difficult for them from a financial perspective. But what are your suggestions and what processes should be followed?
it's a difficult question to answer because every person's circumstance is so unique. So there's no recipe of step 1, 2, and 3. So it is to look at what is the circumstance. And I think the first message is to say there is help. There is a lot of different role players that can help. The police can help. The justice system can help. The medical system can help. And then there's the support services, there's even shelters. So it totally depends on that person's circumstance. But when we are in a relationship like this, we believe the lies and we believe I'm alone and there's no help. Nobody's going to believe me. And that is our message out there. People will believe you. The first step is to ask for help. And maybe it's your neighbor, maybe it's somebody in the shop. It doesn't matter, but the moment you speak up, change is possible.
Yeah. So very often it comes to a point where it ends up in severe abuse or somebody is murdered. I mean, obviously by then a lot of things might have been happening already. How do victims break through denial?
I feel like in cases like that where it has escalated to that amount of violence, there is usually organizations already involved, or the school might have picked up something, or the neighbors might have picked up something. And that's why our new domestic violence there's a lot of amendments which places a lot of responsibility on not only professionals to report or help, but also community members to help. There's actually a form that's called Form 3 that any community member, if they are aware of even suspect domestic violence, and there's a child involved, there's a vulnerable person like a disabled person or an elderly person involved in that home, they have a duty to report that to the nearest police station or the nearest social worker. So that is a thing that we really want to get out there to community members. You actually have a duty to report. Professionals, we definitely need to report if there is violence. We need to report to the police because there's nothing we can do in that situation.
Yeah.
They need to go render a house visit and do wellness checks on that family. And with our duty to report, if something happens to a family and we fail to report, then we can actually be prosecuted for not reporting a high-risk situation.
Yeah. So for our young women coming into relationships and, growing up, what is a preventative action and a proactive action? How do we address this in our young people today, that we are worthy of better treatment? And what personal development programs are there?
It's a difficult question in the sense of we just think we can tell somebody, just leave the relationship, just stop and go. But it's not that easy. And there's so many factors that plays a role in that relationship. And again, it's not like you can see this person is what we call a perpetrator. It happens over time. And to just leave a relationship is not that easy. There's children, there's financial implications, there's being isolated from family and friends. And it is difficult to believe something different if I hear the same message over and over again. I'm not good enough, nobody's going to believe me, I'm a loser. So it's very, very difficult. And I think one of the biggest harms that we can do is to tell somebody, just leave the person, just go. We are not really helping in that way, because sometimes the most dangerous time for a victim is just before they go or just after they left a relationship. So I first want to come in and say, if you know about this, support, listen. Don't tell people what to do. Don't tell them just leave. Don't give them advice. Listen and help them to start believing in themselves and start believing that they're not alone and that there is help available. sometimes we did believe in ourselves and we fall in love and we fell in love and it was beautiful in the beginning and then over time it escalated to abuse.
Yeah.
So it's not like you see all the red flags at once, and especially not when there's butterflies in the tummy. But over time, so for me, one of the answers to this question is get to know somebody well first before you commit into a relationship. Because it's over time that that person's behavior will tell you, do I feel really loved? Do I feel safe? Do I feel cared for? Or is this all about the other person?
Yeah, makes sense. So what happens, sorry, do you want to come in still?
Yes, like working with younger girls, and research also states this. A message that you have to get across in terms of characteristics of a partner. One of the red lights or one of the red flags that you can look out for is if a person has no respect for any laws, like the way they drive, the way they ignore, just breaking the law. That's a red flag. Not having a good relationship with authority. If everyone is always the problem, the boss is always the problem, the supervisor is always the problem, my mother is always the problem, like just not having a good relationship with authority, that's a red flag. If they play the victim all the time, it's always something that happens to them. Someone offended them. It's all about they are the victim, they play the victim. Red flag. Their relationships with authority, like their father figures, whether or not there was immense rejection with a mother figure, primary attachment figure. At the end of the day, your primary attachment figure and the type of attachment you have to that person is going to affect how you show up in your intimate relationships with your romantic partner. So we do a lot of education when we have time to engage with the community, especially with young girls. We focus a lot on what are red flags in relationships, especially at the beginning of the relationship, before you almost sacrifice a lot and give up a lot for this relationship, and there's a child involved in everything.
We've spoken a lot about women and girls being subjected to violence, but this cuts across the board, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think in some cases it might even be more difficult for men to come forward, right? Because they're just so used to carrying the burden.
Yeah.
And there's a huge stigma around that.
Yes.
So we see also men in our office, and we can never get away from that.
Yeah.
It's not only women and children, majority yes, but there's also men involved.
Yeah.
Yes. With men, the message I would like to get across is it also starts with verbal, emotional, and psychological abuse. If there's a female doing that to a male, before it gets physical, before you get reactive, get help or exit the relationship. There's a lot of cases at our police being reported and at our protection order officers where those people are not mediators, they don't have the skills, they're not counselors. They would often reject a protection order for someone because they don't understand the full scope of what it is happening, because you're basically abusing each other. So in situations like that, get a counselor, come to FAMSA, and if the police or justice system is not helping, get to us. Get to us for that help.
So am I right in saying it's never too late? No matter how dire, how difficult the situation, how crippling the finances are, it's never too late.
Sounds like a cliche to say it takes just one step, but it is also the truth. That first step, that first action that you take, although you're scared, although you don't know what's the outcome, although you feel very vulnerable, that first step of asking for help is the first step of many steps. And our message out there is if one place doesn't help you, don't lose hope, go to the next or go to the next level, but insist of help, because there is help and there's people that can really make a difference.
Let's quickly talk about the processes following an action. So once the person's made a brave decision to take action and ask for help, what would you recommend in terms of process? If there's domestic violence or violence involved or domestic abuse or gender-based violence, what would the first steps be then after making that decision?
Let's say now, I'm going to make a scenario now.
Yeah.
If you decide tonight is the night that this was the last time they've hit me, with a physical abuse, or the last time they've forced me to have sexual interaction with them, there's 2 places in George that you can go to without going to the charge office of the police station. You can go to the Tutuzela Care Center, which is based at George Hospital. You can report at EC and say you are a victim of this, and they would refer you to the Tutuzela Care Center and phone a person on call to come support you. There is George Mediclinic. This is quite new, but the George Mediclinic helps anyone without any fees that's a victim of gender-based violence and domestic violence. So if you go there to their EC and say that I'm a victim of this and I need help and I was assaulted or I was whatever happened to you, that is also, they activate the after-hours services, which is a counselor, and then also activating the police to come and take your statement, or if you don't want to take a statement, just that emotional help and medical help immediately. And then also during the day, during office hours, FAMSA is there. At George Tembalito, there is a counsellor at court from FAMSA, and there's a counsellor at the police station. So there's help in that area. In town, we are here. So yeah, after hours, George, and if your nearest thing is just a police station, even there.
And then after that, it's a process of helping with the practical implications
Yeah.
of children and work and finances and all of that.
Yeah.
But there's also the emotional support.
Yes.
That's very important. We always sort out the practical things first, but then it's important to also heal on an emotional level. And that takes time. That is not a quick fix, but we are there to support you and to help you to get back on your feet and to believe in yourself and to build a new life. So there's really help available, and we don't work alone. We can't work alone. We work with a lot of role players in the whole system, from the start, as Salome said, from the police throughout. Maybe if there's a court case, even through that we support and we help.
Yeah, my first step is usually a protection order, and then also a lot of the time shelter. A lot of the time seeking other family members for safeguarding the victim and the children. It's overwhelming for the victim. That's why the emotional support is quite important and significant. And we often find that victims can get discouraged very, very easily. So they withdraw case, or they do this, or with the first challenge they encounter, they would just leave everything and withdraw everything. That's why we are very involved with the victims throughout those processes. And of course, to not subject them to any more further trauma and secondary victimization.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for sharing this information. It's not an easy topic. We know that. But, and it's complex and there's a lot involved, but we are very grateful that you are here and that you are able to provide a service to victims and support them throughout the process. And then just in closing, if you are somebody that is subjected to any form of abuse, no matter how subtle or harsh it is, just know that you are supported, that you are worthy of more, and that there are places that you can go to. Please reach out and stand up for what's inside of you. And the man or the woman that wants to live a different life, you have a choice. And even if the choices that you made brought you to this point, it doesn't matter. It's never too late. You can always, always, always live a different life and choose something different for you and your children if there are children involved. Thank you for being here. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.